Okay, so I'd got sober in the June before we started working together. So I guess I had about 15 months on that journey, and a little bit longer on kind of a spiritual journey, trying to look for something. So my addictions and my alcoholism had got so bad that I'd literally become suicidal, depressed, and I wasn't functioning, and I was ready to check out. Like life had got so unbearably difficult that yeah, I didn't want to be around anymore. I also didn't have the courage to end it, right? So I was stuck in this purgatory. And that led to me going off and doing ayahuasca, and then a few weeks later having a moment of clarity, which woke me up, made me realize that all my problems were my own. I'd been externalizing everything. I could tell you all the reasons I was the way I was, why I was so unhappy. And none of them really were my responsibility or accountability, which, looking back is probably the most ridiculous thing ever, the insanity of it all. So yeah, I basically went along to AA, NA, and got stuck into 12 stepping to try and sort of find my way out of it. And that took me so far. That made me realize where I was with, alcoholism mostly and drug abuse, and probably drug addiction, although that wasn't the main problem. The drink was the real problem at the end of it. So yeah, I sort of cleaned up my life. And then the 12-step programs were really good, super helpful in helping me to at least identify the problem, and sort of get a rudimentary understanding of how to address it, or one way, but it never felt right. And I always felt limited. I always felt like I was in the wrong space with the wrong people, that they weren't really focused on being well, and sort of fixing themselves. I heard a lot of chat about, you're always stuck with your character defects, and that you think a certain way. That's in you. That's your curse, That's how it felt. And that you couldn't change it. And I was like, well, that's nonsense, because I was a different person from when I'd been inactive drinking and active using to what I was now. I was in a much better space. So I didn't believe that, and I actually found it quite troubling. And I didn't think it was helpful looking back on all my problems all the time. I knew where I'd come from, I knew what I'd done, but living there mentally every week was like living there physically. I didn't really see much of a difference. So I needed to find another way. So I tried a couple of different coaching routes before I found you. And the idea was that neuroscience might be the answer, a combination of spirituality and science-driven tools and techniques to change the way I think. And yeah, that's how I arrived with you. Still broken, but less broken than I had been.
Yeah. That was great. I'm so glad that you did find me because
Me too.
things went up from there. Perfect.
Yeah,
And as we started working together, what surprised or impressed you the most about the process?
I think the brilliant thing was the whole life assessment, and you send out good tools for how to address coaching, what's expected, as a bare minimum, I guess. And I was willing to do all that and more. So I knew the commitment I had to. And during our consultation, I could see you looking for motivation. That with motivation would come success, and I think we were a good fit on that. And I was looking for some tools that could just take the pressure off. So when we first started working together, I had this 2 hour like paralysis in the morning, which was brutal, which I was feeding with coffee, and unable, and doom scrolling. I was on my phone
Mhm.
drinking coffee, or on the computer working, drinking coffee, and just not able to get going. And I think what was really amazing was that within the first month, that all changed, and we went from doing that to journaling and meditating, which I had been doing in the day, just not at the right time, and exercising, and everything changed. Within a month, my stress scores had halved and my sleep had improved, and I was actually a functioning human being, with a bit of hope, because I didn't know how to escape that. That had been ever present, and yeah, there were days that were good, there were days that were bad, but predominantly that was the theme. So yeah, within the first month that was done. And you said to me you'll be a different person by the end of 3 months, and that was certainly very, very true. I, the it was night and day how I was as a person and what I believed I could do. And that change in itself gave me a huge amount of confidence. And you hope for it because you kind of promise it, right? That's your guarantee of working with you. If you do the work, this will happen.
Mhm.
So I did the work. I was pretty diligent. I really did focus daily, daily. There was no let off. I showed up and did the work every morning. And I also had the slump later on in the afternoon. I think that was gone within about 6 weeks as well.
Mhm.
And then the other big one was things were still derailing me, and I'd overthink and worry about things still. And I could lose a day, a couple of days sometimes. And prior to, um, yeah, weeks in the past, months, these spirals could go on for, as I sort of call them, these like almost manic episodes. That was also finished, that was done. I was turning stuff around in a few hours or able to sleep on it and have a better outlook the next day. So those things were massive in the first few months. And whilst you hope for them, that's what you're looking for. The actual realization that it's there and stable and sticking, that just gives you all the motivation you need to really dig in and figure out how to level up and do more work.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And like you said, putting in the work, that's like 99% of it. I could give you all the tools in the world, but if you don't show up and do them, nothing's going to happen. But you did from the get-go. It was so consistent, and I think that has a lot to do with your quick results. But good, good, good. And I know you kind of touched on this, but another question we're going to hit here is what tangible changes have you noticed in thoughts, behavior, or energy?
It was brilliant, isn't it? When we do the elevation checks at the end of the cycles we do, I go back and I look at my whole life assessment from the beginning and then the elevation checks we've done.
Mhm.
And you can see there's hope and like a good mental attitude towards this, really positive in the approach. So I knew where I was going with it. Um, but actually, as you read them back now, and as I look at my journaling, even all the other stuff that I do alongside this, now I'm actually figuring out, okay, I've made another step up. Okay, and I've realized some stuff about my behaviors. And this is across the board with, food, like tiredness, stress, all these things, what is my relationship with like that? Mindfulness within myself, how does my environment impact me? But now actually perspective work where I'm able to look at how other people are coming across. It's not all about me, right? Now I'm considering other people in the mix. So
Mhm.
that step up where I'm now conscious of others and, considering what might be going on in their life and creating space for them or figuring out how we communicate. That's amazing, and that gives me a completely different level of confidence that now I'm actually quite useful in my environments and know how to create my own. And with that comes the space to think and feel how I want. So, as you know, and others won't yet, but I didn't know how to process thoughts, emotions, feelings. I didn't know that everybody had negative, invasive thoughts, and that was, from our sort of biological and DNA coding, how we survived and evolved as a species. So and I didn't know that 95% of those thoughts were repetitive. So we
Mhm.
figured out how to identify them. And then they became less real. And actually, I was in charge of them and I could change them. And I could go, well, why am I focusing on that? That's silly. It's not even true. Journal it and figure it out. So actually, I went from having zero grasp of anything other than complete depression and complete hedonistic escape to sort of being able to understand the range of stuff that goes in between that I'd
Uh-huh.
never. So now I have a completely different experience of life that, yeah, I still have bad days and stuff still happens, but it doesn't derail me. And even if I do go low for a couple of days, like you do, ups and downs of life, I'm on a
Mhm.
much more stable trajectory. As a general rule, I'm pretty upbeat. And if I am down, I'm able to talk to people about it, figure it out, or just self-soothe, which was something I couldn't do before without self-isolate and locking myself away from the world to try and survive the moment. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's I don't know how you measure that. It's immeasurably different, right? I don't know how you put a score on it, but I have a life now where I didn't before. I was in purgatory before, whereas now life isn't happening to me, it's kind of happening for me, is the complete contrast.
Mhm. How would you say your emotional recovery changed from like before we worked together, you mentioned it would take like weeks, maybe even months to recover from something. How has that changed?
Yeah, I think actually that one's been a slower burner and a slower build. So to begin with, I think even around Christmas and the New Year, whilst I was able to process things better, I think that hang up was still there. I think I was still quite heavy. I think in the period between January and now, I've got a lot better at that. And I think my emotional recovery is much more real, based on lots and lots of wins, and getting through stuff, which before I just wasn't sure what was going on. Now I think we've built that one up, and I think that'll continue to grow. My resilience at work is loads better. My ability to deal with conflict is much better. I'm in a much better place because I can see it in my children's interactions with me, where they express everything, now that I'm a safe place to bring all their emotions, all their thoughts, and we can go from having a laugh 1 minute to there being tension, to having difficult conversations about education and exercise and food, and just creating space for us all to grow and get to know each other sort of post recovery, or within recovery, and within me building this new life. So that's just improving all the time. Again, I think looking back in hindsight, you can see, yeah, there was definite improvement, and you can see it through the elevation checks. I don't quite know how to articulate it apart from it has massively improved. And it's present in my relationships with people, and that I'm much more trusted. And people will bring stuff to me because I feel like they know I sort of go through my process that I do with you, or
Mhm.
within myself, to explain how to get through it. And people seem to get a lot out of that. It's quite transparent, and it comes across as quite vulnerable. And I don't do it for those reasons. It's just the way I work. But when you share that with people, it kind of creates a bond, and an openness between you, and a connectivity, which I never had before. I'm making much better relationships everywhere, but also being much more picky and choosy about the relationships I have. I don't let people drain my energy. I don't have any toxicity around me, and the boundaries that I created for myself, I apply to other people. So, it's quite a big holistic piece that we've done there.
Yes, it is. Yay, I love it, love it. Good. What results or breakthroughs are you most proud of?
Gosh. I think actually the courage piece in it is the most proud I am of myself, and I'm getting a bit emotional now because I had the courage to sort of stay in the fight, keep on quitting. I never gave up on quitting, and I never gave up on hope. So I knew I had this ability to pick myself up from, rock bottom, repeated rock bottoms, and an ever deepening rock bottom, where I was done with life. To have the courage to say, this is all inside me, everything that's going on, you're accountable for. There's no one coming to save you. And the inner child who wanted saving, I became the adult that would save that kid. I saved myself, and me and my inner child have got a very fun relationship now, where we have a lot of fun. I let that kid play, as you know, and I embrace life, and
Mhm.
that works for the kids as well, where you've got a similar mental age probably. So maybe they're advanced, who knows. But yeah, that whole thing is just the magical part. But that all came from courage to look at myself, and that developed into a discipline where every time something difficult comes up, that's the first thing I take on. I don't hide from that now, because every hard thing we've done, and there's been lots of them, has led to a breakthrough, has led to growth. It's led to my development. It's taken me off running ultras and trekking the pole and pushing, myself mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and so now, because of that determination to face the hard stuff, especially if it's things that I don't like about myself, where I've been impatient, intolerant, not empathetic enough, all these things which I should be, and now have the capability to be. I've just become a much better human being by addressing myself and my own shortcomings. So, when I was in the rooms and they were telling me, I won't be able to change that, this is like a big, big poo-poo to them. It's like I have, and I
Yeah.
continue to, and I'm
Mhm.
so glad that I'm not in the limbo that I was in that situation. That I did manage to, through determination, grit, and luck, find somebody who could help me, and find techniques and tools. And that also then I was able to open up to you as well, and to be able to share like this on what is going to be a public testimonial is huge. Like
Yeah.
I didn't know how I felt about this, but when you asked, I said I'd help because you've helped me, and I want you to help other people. And that means I've got to just put it out there, and it's like the most terrifying thing ever. But I'm
Oh,
glad to do
I'm
it.
happy
I'm
you're
gonna see
doing
where it
it.
lands.
I'm so
Yeah.
proud of you for this is courage right here. It's sharing. That's one of the most courageous things you can do. Share your own
Yeah.
story and make it more accessible for other people because they can hopefully relate to what you are saying.
Oh yeah, you can help so many people and on so many levels. And I think, yeah, it's good. I'm still finding out who I am, right? I'm testing my limits, and I think I always did that. And I did it with drugs and alcohol, right? It's like how far could I push, and periodically with sport, and whatnot. And I did it at work. Everything was a validation exercise, and it was about seeking the wrong sort of external validation. The next bit for me is about peace. I'm at peace more and more. I'm not looking for happiness per se, because with happiness comes sadness, right? If you gain something, you can lose something. Attachment is like the sort of killer for me. And I get attached to things. I see that, whether it's, sugar or grains or people or behaviors, and in the past, really toxic stuff. I'm always looking for this external fix, this external solution. But the big turnaround with this is knowing that all the answers are within and that peace is within. And I'm at peace more and more. And I find with peace, the problem with that is once you lose it, it becomes apparent very quickly. And I can body scan and mind scan very quickly to figure out why. And I can identify my triggers. And that's brilliant. So generating more of that inner peace, that inner validation, that self-care, self-love, which at the beginning I found very hard, like to articulate and to figure out I was doing it. And I remember when I had a session, I went, if I can't recognize that I love myself with all this bloody work that I'm doing, getting fit, getting healthy, getting my mind right, getting sober, doing all these things, like at what point do I believe that I love myself? I was
Mhm.
looking for this big eureka moment, like my moment of clarity, right? Which was huge. What a great big gift. But you don't get miracles every day, right? The miracle is often built over time, and the change is built slowly, day at a time, that only when you look back, you go, bloody hell, look how far I've come, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, it's just like knowing now that I've got the rest of my life to get better and better at this. There's no rush anymore. Whereas before, the rush was to get well so I could put my life back on track and be a great dad, right? Be a good friend, be a good colleague, but mostly just not hate my life, right? And
Yeah.
now it's like, okay, how can I love my life more? How can I serve the people that I love better, right? And that's changed my whole approach to what I do for other people. Like, actually, if you step in to help people, you're actually taking away a chance for them to evolve and develop. You create this whole mismatch in your relationship as well. So now I'm happy to share conversation about stuff, right? Or share my story, but I don't pick up anyone else's problems. But I'll tell them that I'll be there for them. I can be present, I'll be with you, right? But I'm
Mhm.
not doing it for you. You do it for yourself. And that's been huge because that's taken so much pressure off me, because I only have to worry about myself, right? And the ripple effect is that has a knock-on effect to everyone else. So that's the real thing that I'm working on, maintaining, embedding, developing that, and just being the best human being I can be. And look, I have days where that's not great, right? And I still have to look in the mirror at the end of the day and own stuff when I haven't done right, and journal about it, meditate on it, and figure out how I get better at it, right? But I don't beat myself up anymore. That's not the end of the world. That's just a learning moment.
Mhm.
So it's just about identifying the learning moments and believing good stuff's going to happen because I'm putting good stuff out there.
Yeah, and it will, and it does. Perfect. If you were to describe the coaching experience in one sentence, what would it be?
Oh my God. One sentence. And
Just
look how
one.
much I talk. This is like a punishment at the end. I suppose I could describe it as the best personal development experience I've undertaken.
That's a good sentence. If
Yeah,
someone was considering working with me but wasn't sure yet, what would you tell them?
I'd call them mad. Honestly, it's the best thing you can do. If you're struggling with anything I've talked about, or if you're struggling with um thought patterns, feelings, just stuck in life, and you've internalized them, or you're looking for external fixes, or you're after cheap dopamine, any of that stuff, any of the stuff that's holding you back, you would help them. If they're willing to work, if they're honest about where they're at, if they get real with themselves and are willing to do the work, they'll be a completely different person, in no time at all. Within a month, you can have a massively, a measurable change. You can measure the stress changes. You can measure the sleep that you get, and the sort of confidence you start to get very quickly. And I think that in itself then becomes something you just want to do. So yeah, just take a chance on it. It's honestly the best money I've ever invested in myself.
Oh. Well, thank you, Neil. I appreciate you so much, and watching you grow has been such a blessing to me as well. And I've loved our journey together, and I'm excited to continue it.